Once upon a time, in a very small village, lived a poor beggar who sat on the lonely path that led to the village stream. He was blind and popularly known as Bello, the village beggar. Whenever the villagers walked past him, they dropped some money in his money bowl. Everyone knew Bello, and the people were so generous to him, some even made it a duty to provide food for him. Bello was grateful to them for their generosity. However, no one knew where Bello had come from or if he was an indigene of their village. All they knew was that he was a blind beggar who sat close to the village stream. One evening, a girl named Deo was returning home from the stream when she came across Bello laying by the corner of the bush, asleep. She looked into his money bowl and saw some money. Deo snuck quietly towards Bello and stole his money bowl, ensuring not to make a sound. As she was about to leave with the money, Bello disappeared before her eyes, filling her with so much terror. She stood there frozen and began to plead with Bello to return and take his money, but Bello never returned. Confused as to what to do, Deo threw the money to the ground and ran home like one who was being chased by a ghost. She locked herself up in her room and wondered who Bello was and what he would do to her for stealing from him. Just as she sat on her bed, lost in her own thoughts, her legs began to itch. Deo rubbed them for a few minutes and noticed that the itching was now getting worse. She took an ointment and applied it to her legs, relieving the itch. After a few hours, Deo went to bed still thinking about Bello and the trouble she might have gotten herself into. Later that night, she woke up to realize that her legs had now transformed into those of a goat. She screamed at the top of her voice, waking her father, who came into her room and was confronted by the horrific sight. He opened his eyes in shock as he stared blankly at his daughter's goat legs. "How did this happen, Deo?" her father asked, and Deo, although terrified, told him a completely different story. She narrated that Bello begged her for some money that evening on her way back from the stream, and when she failed to give him money, he became so agitated and began to curse at her. Before she knew what was happening, he disappeared before her eyes, leaving her frightened by the bush. She ran home and went to bed, only to wake up now and realize that her legs had transformed into those of a goat. Her father, in anger, decided to head out the next morning to confront Bello. When he arrived at the spot where Bello usually sat to beg, he met no one there and waited patiently for hours, hoping that Bello would show up as he usually did. But Bello never showed up. This did not look good, as Deo's father began to think of what to do. He returned home and met his daughter, Deo, in so much pain. Her cries pierced through his heart as he rushed her to the hut of his friend, Ojo, the village healer. Ojo had never seen anything like it before and tried all he could to heal Deo's legs, but failed. He advised Deo's father to take his daughter to another powerful healer who lived close to the village mountains. They arrived at the healer's hut, and she too was unable to heal Deo's legs. Mr. Teju took his daughter to so many healers, who were all unable to transform his daughter's goat legs. By this time, the news had spread around the village, and the people were terrified to know that Bello, the beggar, was the one responsible for the calamity. They began to troop in their numbers to catch a glimpse of Deo's legs, as no one had ever seen a human with animal legs before. Weeks turned into months, and Deo could now barely walk, as the legs were too painful for her. To see that none of the healers had been able to heal his daughter's legs, Mr. Teju decided to pay a visit to a popular seer in the village to see if she could find Bello and tell him where he was. The seer revealed to him that Bello was no ordinary beggar. She said that Bello came to their village on a mission and was angered by his daughter, Deo, who tried to steal from him. Mr. Teju looked shocked to hear this, as he realized that his daughter, Deo, had lied to him. The seer told him that if nothing was done soon, Deo's entire body would transform into that of a goat. Terrified of the revelation, Mr. Teju asked the seer what he could do, and the seer told him that his daughter, Deo, had to successfully complete Bello's mission in their village to gain his forgiveness and be free. He asked what the mission was, and the seer told him that it was up to his daughter, Deo, to find out. Mr. Teju returned home and confronted Deo about her lies, threatening to disown her if she refused to tell him the truth. Deo, knowing how strict her father could be, decided to tell the truth. She narrated how she tried to steal from Bello and how he disappeared before her eyes. Mr. Teju could not believe that his daughter, Deo, tried to steal from a poor blind beggar. He had always provided for all her needs and wondered why she had to go about stealing from others. This was not the first time that Deo was stealing, but her parents, especially her mother, paid little or no attention to this. A few years ago, a young woman came to their home to see Deo's mother, saying that Deo stole some items from her market store. Instead of Deo's mother to caution her daughter and show her disapproval of the act, she dismissed the woman and defended Deo, claiming her daughter could do no such thing. This negligence only encouraged Deo's behavior, leading to the predicament they now faced. Realizing the severity of the situation, Deo decided to return to the place where it all began, to the exact spot where Bello sat to beg for money. She made up her mind to sit there and wait, hoping to understand Bello's mission in their village. She sat there patiently for hours and watched as the villagers walked past her in shock. They gossiped and even pointed at her goat legs. What could she have done to be punished in such a miserable way? Does it mean that her family has abandoned her? Some even asked themselves as they shook their heads in pity and walked past her. Deo sat there for hours but noticed nothing unusual. After a few hours, when it was almost getting dark, she returned home and could not help but remember how the villagers treated her. This moved her to tears as she dreaded returning back there the next day. However, knowing that this was the only way that she could secure her freedom, she returned the next day, not minding what the people had to say. As she sat there all alone, two girls from the village approached her and began to mock her goat legs. They told her how ridiculous she looked and even went further to bleat like a goat as they laughed out loud and walked away. This broke Deo, who cried her eyes out and wished that she could disappear. The next day, however, despite all that had happened, Deo still showed up at the spot again. She paid no mind to the villagers or what they had to say. A few hours later, heavy rain began to fall, and Deo made her way to a small hut close to the village stream to seek shelter from the rain. To her greatest surprise, she met a very old woman who lived alone in the hut. Deo had always seen the hut whenever she went to the stream to fetch some water but never knew that someone lived in it because it looked deserted. She approached the old woman and noticed that she was sick, so Deo decided to take good care of her by tidying up her hut and preparing a meal for her to eat. The old woman was so grateful to Deo and thanked her for her kindness. Once the rain subsided, Deo returned home, happy to have helped the helpless woman. The next morning, she returned to her usual spot again. She sat there for hours and saw a young boy who was heading to the stream to fetch some water. He looked so sad and distressed, and Deo could not help but ask what the problem was. "Is everything okay with you?" she asked the little boy, who burst out in tears in front of her. Deo felt sorry for him and pressed to know what the problem was. The little boy narrated to her how he was suffering at the hands of his stepmother. His father died a few years ago, leaving him all alone with his wicked stepmother, who hated him so much and poured out her frustration on him. His stepmother blamed him for the death of his father and did everything to make his life miserable. Deo then went on to ask about his mother, and the little boy revealed to her that his mother abandoned him with his father after he was born. Deo's heart was so heavy to hear this. She comforted the boy and promised to help him in any way that she could. She gave him some food to eat, and the young boy was so delighted to finally eat some food after days of being starved. Once he was done eating, Deo promised to find a permanent solution to his problem. She also promised to bring him food every day, and the young boy was so delighted and thanked her for her kindness. Deo returned home that evening and could not stop thinking about the young boy and how she could help him out of his predicament. She thought deeply and decided to go in search of his mother. Deo knew that the little boy would be better off living with his own mother than suffering at the hands of a woman who lacked compassion for him. However, she had no idea how she would be able to find his mother, but hoped to get some information from him that would be helpful. The next morning, the little boy stopped by again, and Deo asked if he knew any details about his mother. The boy gave her a bracelet that his mother wore on his wrist before she left. Deo took the bracelet from the boy, hoping that it would help her find his mother. She returned home that evening and met a very powerful woman in her home. Her father, Mr. Teju, had traveled to a distant village to bring the powerful woman to see if she could break the curse that was placed on his daughter. On seeing Deo, the woman revealed that she had the power to reverse the curse. She told Deo to stretch forth her hand, and immediately Deo stretched her hand towards the woman. The woman froze in shock. "Where did you get this from?" she asked Deo, pointing towards the bracelet on her hand. Deo looked at her confused and said that she got it from a little boy who lived in their village. The woman insisted on meeting the boy, and Deo asked why that is. The woman revealed to her that the boy was her son. She told Deo that she gave birth to him a few years ago and was so excited to be a mother. This was before she accepted her calling as a priestess. However, her family knew that she was not going to accept her calling as a priestess if her baby was still there with her, so they connived and sent her baby away to a faraway place, to a person that she never knew, shielding him under a very powerful spell that made it impossible for her to find him, even with her powers. She searched and searched, but couldn't find her son anywhere, and all efforts to make her family reveal his location to her failed, as everyone swore never to divulge the information to her. The woman told Deo that immediately she gave birth to her son, she wore him the special bracelet on his wrist. Deo could not believe her ears as she took the powerful woman to the hut where the little boy lived with his stepmother. When they got there, they heard a loud scream and noticed that his wicked stepmother was beating him up mercilessly. This angered the boy's mother, the powerful woman, who stormed the hut and turned the wicked woman into a goat immediately. The wicked woman transformed into a goat, and Deo realized that her legs had returned back to normal, the curse had been reversed. Deo could not contain her joy. It was then that she realized that saving the little boy was Bello's mission in their village. What she did not know was that Bello was the spirit of the boy's father, who had been watching over him all the while, hoping to find someone who would help his son out of his predicament. Deo, now free from the curse, watched as the priestess embraced her son for the very first time. Her heart was so full of joy for being able to play a part in reuniting the little boy with his mother. The priestess thanked Deo for leading her to her son as she headed out of the village happily with him. Deo returned home, delighted at how everything played out. Her heart was gladdened to know that the little boy's suffering was finally over. She also learned her lesson never to steal again, and from that day on, she changed and became a better version of herself. The lesson to be learned from this story is that every action has its consequences. Never take that which belongs to another because the repercussion may be severe and unexpected. Failing to address bad behavior can lead to severe consequences. Therefore, it is important to guide and correct those that we care about to prevent them from falling into greater trouble. Also, keep in mind that honesty and integrity are crucial virtues that must be upheld at all times. We should also learn to be truthful and take responsibility for our actions because lying and deceit can lead us into greater trouble and suffering. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support helps us grow our channel. See you in our next story. Bye.